Let's bring in Fred Kemp. He's the president and CEO of the Atlantic Council and a CNBC contributor. Nicholas Burns is professor at Harvard's Kennedy School, former U.S. ambassador to China and to NATO. And it's great to have you both here. And there's so much to kind of dive into, but I'm going to try to keep it in really kind of the lane for investors and our audience here. So, Fred, for, I guess, first question to you, is it the tariff issue that now is foremost? You expect even that to blow over? How would you think about the sequence of events that might take place here as the president remains focused on Greenland?
Well, first of all, going ahead of Nick Burns is a real treat for me, former ambassador to NATO, somebody from whom I've been stealing ideas for many years. But let me go first in any case. Look, when you have the U.S., when you have markets cheer, when the U.S. president announces to the world he's not going to take military action against NATO territory, it gives you a little of a sense of where we are. But the more serious point about this is the president has really put this in domestic terms. His whole speech in the very beginning was talking about the strength of the U.S. economy, about energy. And then when he talked about Greenland, he even put that in domestic terms, which is its geopolitical position, security position between Russia and China and the United States, so that it could be used for air defense for Golden Dome. In terms of your answer, I think that we're going through what a senior European official told me yesterday was shock therapy. The Europeans know that they have to provide more for their own defense. That could actually be a good thing, also a good thing for NATO. But they also know that their deal wasn't done. They thought the tariff deal was done, but the tariff deal wasn't done. And now Trump is adding these additional tariffs for the countries that are standing in the way of his purchase of Greenland. So I think this will play out right now, but he's also turning it into a purchase negotiation, an economic negotiation with the Danes, and eventually I believe also the Greenlanders, who may want to be independent, but they don't necessarily want to be part of the U.S. And so we'll see how this plays out now. You've got a European Council meeting on Thursday. That's all the leaders of the European Union countries. We'll see where they come down on this. They have up to $93 billion of further sanctions, tariffs, and other economic means they could use on us. There's also something called an anti-coercion instrument that the French would like to implement, which would be a real, they call it sort of the nuclear option in trade deals, which could hit U.S. foreign direct investments and many other things. I don't think it will go that far. We are now in deal-making territory. The question is whether the president is willing to stand down at all from his sort of absolutist stance that he has to have Greenland as American property.
Ambassador Burns, even as the U.S. and Europe have been kind of trading comments back and forth and tariff threats back and forth over this, it's been pretty quiet from China and Russia. Is that strategic? Or how should we expect, ultimately, if we're casting this as a threat from those nations, how should we expect them to respond?
Well, the Chinese and Russians probably don't want to interrupt, as the United States has so markedly hurt our relationship with Europe. I think that's probably their strategy, because if in effect we're looking at a rupture, and that's what Prime Minister Carney of Canada said yesterday, not a transition away from the old liberal order, but a rupture, then the beneficiaries of a rupture between Europe and the United States will be China and Russia. Kelly, I thought that President Trump, obviously, it was a good thing that he withdrew his threat of the use of force against a NATO ally, Denmark. But I don't think that's going to be very convincing to the Europeans for two reasons. First, they know he's unpredictable, and they know that he could turn a dime and, re-inject the use of force, the threat of the use of force tomorrow. And second, this is the first time in the history, as Fred knows, of a NATO alliance that the United States has ever threatened another ally, and we're the leader of that alliance. And so it's not going to be easily forgotten. A lot of damage has been done. And Fred's right to point to the fact that the president left the tariff threat on the table today. So there might be a rocky road ahead if the Europeans respond to that and match our tariffs blow by blow.
I had read some reporting recently. I don't know how seriously to take this idea, but that China was actually trying to make a lot of economic inroads, Ambassador, with Europe. Is there any scenario in which this ends up resulting in, far from America and Europe coming closer together over this issue and kind of beefing up security, that it would leave an opening for the Europeans to, I don't know, do more business or be on more favorable trade terms or something like that with China itself as a result?
That's certainly what the Chinese want to do. The Chinese want to divide the United States from Europe. They've been trying to do that for years. I don't think it's going to work in the short term in 2026 because China is the major military supplier of microelectronics to the Russian defense industrial base for the Russian war in Ukraine. That's an existential issue for the Europeans. So I don't think you'll see Europeans flocking to China to build up their economic relationships, and certainly not at a time when China is dumping a lot of very low-priced exports on the European market to kill the European manufacturers. I wouldn't see the Europeans taken in by the Chinese that easily.